Well, shalom everybody, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me. We are up to page 188 of volume 3 of Rabbi Avigdor Miller's new translation and commentary of the Mesillat Yesharim, The Path of the Just. Here is a image of the cover in case you're new to the channel and this is maybe one of the first videos you've clicked on, you're not familiar with the series. Normally we do these as morning audios, but once a week I like to do a video and put it up over the web and get the message outfield that we're going through this very important work that deals principally with Musar, that is the refinement of a person's ethical behavior. And it's an eye-opening book, and especially with the contemporary commentaries by Rabbi Avigdor Miller, who's a straight shooter and just doesn't pull any punches. It's a fascinating read and it's a page-turner. And so we're up to chapter 19, entitled The Divisions of Hasadut. That is piety, going above and beyond, going above the minimum requirement, which I'm sure many people are familiar with. And we're up to part 7, and we're now looking at various rabbis and some of their sort of routine activities that they would do that merited long life. Now we know according to the Torah, there's various things that merit long life, probably the most well-known of them, and I hope you know what it is. It's something that is akin to the fountain of youth, and that is guarding one's tongue. And the other one is respecting parents, and also an argument can be made giving tzedakah, giving charity. And there's one other one that I never seem to remember, but there are also subcategory actions, if that's a thing, that also merit long life, and we're going to find out what they are in these videos. So, if you're interested in living a long time, it's probably a good video for you to watch. So part 7 is entitled Meriting Long Life, and as I said, we're going through a couple of sages, and we're going to look firstly at Elazar ben Shemua. Now, previously, we looked at Rabbi Ben Zaki, who was a very prominent rabbi that saved the Jewish world during the Roman siege against Jerusalem. He was miraculously, him and a lot of other Torah scholars were given free passage, and they were allowed to set up a house of learning in Yavne. Those of you that are familiar with Rabbi Ben Zaki's life, this is one of the principal things that he's known for. And of course, there's many other things about the man that you can actually learn. But now we're looking at Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua, and the Mesillat Yesharim says, it also says there in Tractate Megillah 27b, the students of Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua asked, with what merit did you live so long? And he said to them, I never made the Beit Knesset a shortcut between two streets. Rabbi Avigdor Miller says, he walked all the way around and he didn't go through the Beit Knesset. Some learn that this means even more than that. Even though he entered the Beit Knesset by one door to pray there, he wouldn't walk out a different way, which would have afforded him a shortcut. He went out the same way he came in and then walked around. The Mesillat Yesharim resumes, and he never stepped over the heads of holy people, meaning that, according to Rabbi Avigdor Miller, people sat on the floor in those days, so if he arrived late, it would have appeared as if he were walking over their heads because his garment would swirl around over their heads. Therefore, he never did that. And he always came early so that he shouldn't have to walk by people sitting on the ground. Here are two subjects, the honor of the Beit Knesset and honor of fellow man, not to step over the place where they are sitting, so that it should not look like he was scorning them by walking over them. So two chief things that he did that merited long life: not using the house of study as a shortcut in any way, shape or form, but he in his mind had that place revered as being a holy place and a place of learning, and never to be used for any mundane actions, even if it might provide him with shortening his journey. And also he would not walk near fellow chachamim, fellow wise men in the house of study when they were sitting low to the ground. In some cases, there are times when Jews will sit low to the ground during sitting Shiva or mourning the destruction of the second Beit HaMikdash, for example. And so he didn't want to physically be higher than they were and be passing by them. It's just not a good look. And so what's interesting about this is seem to be sort of fairly mundane actions. You know, they're not sort of award-winning big ticket actions. These are actions that it seems are within the grasp of all of us to be able to do. Okay, so part 8, the next rabbi we're going to be looking at that merited long life for various things is Rabbi Preda. Another statement, again looking at Megillah 27b, the students of Rabbi Preda asked him, "With what merit did you live so long?" And he said to them, "In all my life, never did anybody come before me to the Beit HaMikdash." He was the first one. So, you've heard the expression, early attendance at the house of study. It shows eagerness, an eagerness and a willingness to learn if somebody turns up before the aforesaid time. So in your religious life, if you are told to, we're going to meet at this time, we're going to do this thing here, it's important that you turn up early because it shows that you are eager to do the will of Hashem in whatever thing at that moment is relating to your religious observance. You don't want to be somebody that just consistently comes late because it shows that you're not really into it. And the same happens in the secular world. If you turn up late to your job, it's not going to look good for your job. And even if you turn up to meet a potential partner for a date and you turn up late, that's certainly not going to win you any points. So this in all cases these are common sense things. But they're things that, we might not often think about. That means he always gave the Kohanim the right to make the first bracha. Hang on, I think I skipped a bit. He was the first one. I never said a bracha before Kohen. So if there was a Kohen present in the synagogue, he would never go ahead of them in terms of making a blessing. That means he always gave a Kohen the right to make the first bracha and to eat first at the meal. And he did not eat from an animal from which the gifts of the Kohanim had not been separated, which is according to Torah law. You can actually eat them. No, they have to be separated, but Rabbi Preda would not actually eat the separated parts of the animal until the actual Kohanim that were present had actually commenced eating. So once they're separated, you can eat them, and there's no actual Torah observance to refrain from eating before the first Kohanim embarks on eating the separated portions of the meat. But Rabbi Preda would wait. Even in some secular houses, going back 30, 40 years, it was customary that nobody in the household, when they sat down to eat the family meal, every member of the household wouldn't eat before the father ate. And this was in secular households, going back, 40 years ago, maybe a bit longer than that, because, with technology and, the internet and all these distractions that we have, very few families now have the custom to eat together at a table with the rest of the family at mealtimes. People just tend to look after themselves. Maybe if you've got a young family, that still happens to some degree, but once kids get to sort of maturity, they get to teenage years, the family meals tend to fall by the wayside, which is a bit of a shame. Anyway, getting off the track, Rabbi Avigdor Miller says in commentary to this, the various parts of the animal that must be given to the Kohen as gifts are taken from the meat which is slaughtered as kulin, and that again is that is actually directly from Deuteronomy 18:3. However, before the gifts are given, the animal is not considered tevel. It's not forbidden to eat, but Rabbi Preda would not eat until the gifts had been given. It says they've been given there, not even since it commenced to eat. So there you go. Okay, so part 19. Now we're looking at Rabbi Nekenya. Rabbi Nekenya. The Mesillat Yesharim says, and they said, this is Megillah 28a, tractate Megillah 28a, quoting, the students of Rabbi Nekenya asked him, with what merit did you live so long? And he said to them, I never honored myself by somebody else's dignity. I never honored myself by somebody else's indignity, I should say. I never honored myself by somebody else's indignity. and a curse against my fellow man never went out of my bed. Rabbi Avigdor Miller says, this means he never went to sleep having hard feelings against anybody. He made it a principle to forgive everyone, even his own wife, before he went to sleep. Even if people had wronged him in some way, when he went to bed, he forgave them. So this is one of the features of the bedtime Shema, is that we would say, I forgive anybody who's angered or antagonized me, whether they sinned against me, whether they sinned against my body, my property, my honor, anything of mine. We can sometimes get into the habit of saying that and not really thinking about it, not really cycling through our minds all the people that may have actually insulted us that day or done something really bad to us that day. But if we can actually do that, we can actually drop everything and do it on a daily basis, because there's so much easier to deal with the afflictions that come to sort of buffet us on a daily basis rather than looking at them in brackets of weeks, months, and even in years. Some people do. They don't even do anything until Yom Kippur, and who's going to recall all the incidences that has accrued over a person's life over a year and be able to get them out on one day. So if you're going through a day and you are reviewing the day and you're doing the bedtime Shema and you are forgiving people of the sins that they've committed against you, and you are honestly going to bed at peace, being at peace with them, you're on a very high level, and that's going to be something that contributes to you having long life. And the Gemara explains the first statement regarding Rav Kanina, that I didn't gain honor through somebody else's indignity. It is like the following case. Rav Huna was carrying a hoe or a shovel on his shoulder because he was a farmer. Came along Rav Kanina bar Kanilia. He was a Zadik, and he saw Rav Huna carrying the hoe, and he took it from him and he said, I want to carry that hoe for you. But Rav Huna said to him, no, if you're accustomed to carrying the hoe in your town, it's not beneath your dignity or right. You can carry it. But if not, because Rav Kanina bar Kanilia was a very wealthy man, that I should get honor by your indignity, I do not want. Okay, so let's continue to read it, and I'll talk about it in a sec. That although the plain meaning is that when a person honors himself with somebody else's shame, ordinarily that means he puts the other person down, so that by means of putting somebody else to shame, he would get more honor. But to Hasidim, there is another meaning. It is not proper that he should be honored, even if the other party came and volunteered, like Rav Kanina bar Kanilia volunteered to carry the hoe of Rav Huna, if that would result in indignity for his fellow man. So this person was greater than Rav Huna, Rabbi Kanilia, Rav Kuna bar Kanilia, and he said, I'll carry you the hoe. No, because if you're not, unless you're accustomed to doing that in your town, because if you're not and you are carrying my hoe and people are looking and going, what's the great Zadik Rav Kanina bar Kanilia doing carrying a farming implement for somebody else? Who is that guy? And people will give me false honor and they'll think that I'm greater than you. I'm not greater than you. And this is going to make me look like a fool. Even though you're the one that's instigating it, I can't take that risk. And so it gives you a little bit of insight into the workings of the mind of Hussid. They're always aware of what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. Rav Huna wouldn't accept the honor because it would be an indignity for Rav Kanina bar Kanalia. Therefore, the same statement of the sages was usually means one thing, that you shouldn't cause yourself honor by comparing yourself to somebody else. But for Hasidim, another explanation, even if somebody comes along and wants to give honor voluntarily, but it's going to cause him a certain indignity, Hussid says, if you're not accustomed to carrying this thing in your hometown, then you cannot do it for me because I don't want honor through your indignity. Fantastic little insight there to see that, they're very much focused on these, what we would call the thin end of the wedge. You've heard the expression, that's the thin end of the wedge. Meaning that, okay, it's not a big deal. Okay, it's not a big deal at the moment, but it could become a huge deal. And so the mind of Hussid is very much across everything and just watches vigilantly to see, hang on, no, I know what you're saying is a nice gesture, but it's only going to cause harm. I know you're being polite and everything. And indeed, if it is your custom to carry farming implements, fine. But if it isn't, it ain't happening. Okay, let's look at Rabbi Zera. This is part 10 of chapter 19. That's a very big thing to say. Hang on, I missed a bit. Similarly, Rabbi Zera said, according to Megillah 28a, I was never angry in my house. Okay, so Rabbi Zera was never angry in his house. That's a very big thing to say, but he was able to say it because he was a chassid. It's an ideal that everyone should aspire to. So people get angry. People might get angry for the most stupidest things. Somebody gets somebody a gift, and it's this beautiful gift. Maybe it's an elaborate camera, and the camera has to be assembled. And the person's so excited to get this gift. They've heard about it, and they thought, I never would own something as nice as that. And so they sit down, they start to read instructions, and they can't put the camera together. And they're getting frustrated, they're getting angry, and at one point they break a part of it, and they lose it. And this person was meant to be happy. They received this gift, and now they're saying things and they're storming around the house. And it's just like, I bought that for the person to be happy. Now I've made them angry. I think anger can spring out from anywhere. You never know. The most tranquil and precious moment could just all of a sudden turn directly in the opposite direction. So you have to always be vigilant. You have to say, okay, I'm really having difficulty putting this camera together. I might leave it and I'll come back to it later, or I'll make an inquiry and say, what am I doing wrong? I never walked ahead of somebody who was greater than me out of respect for the Torah. Says the Mesillat Yesharim, maybe he crossed the street or walked faster, says Rabbi Avigdor Miller, but he didn't walk in front of a person who was more important. Okay, so he never became angry in his home, and he never walked ahead of anybody who he thought was more important than him. And usually when you have that attitude of a chassid, most people you see, if you don't know them, you immediately assume they're more important than you. I never thought of Torah in unclean alleys, so he never thought Torah thoughts in places that had a bad smell, had rubbish. That's why it's forbidden for you to study Torah and think Torah thoughts when you're in the bathroom or in the toilet. For us, that's easy, but for him it was extremely difficult to desist from what he loved to do most, just because it was a dishonor for the Torah to think in such places. And there's stories about the Vilna Gaon, how he really struggled when he had to go to the toilet to not think Torah thoughts. But for most of us, it's not an issue. But for the greats, it is extremely difficult for them not to be focusing their thoughts somewhere on Torah matters. And the mere act of going to the toilet and taking a break from that type of thinking and thinking about that subject is one of the most enormously difficult tasks for a human being to achieve. Something that we can't relate to, most of us, on any level. Now we understand what a difficulty it was for him to refrain from thinking about Torah in unclean places. He never fell asleep in the Beit HaMidrash, not a long sleep, nor even a very short sleep. So it was customary for people to be able to feel as though they were able to fall asleep sometimes. Maybe they just would have a 20-minute power nap. But this was definitely not the case for Rabbi Zera. He would never be found sleeping in the Beit Knesset. For most people, this is not an ordeal. They can walk in and out, but he spent all of his time in the Beit HaMidrash, even late at night. And if he never dozed off, that was already hasadut. So, this guy was the first one there and the last one out, and no one ever saw him ever there asleep. All attributes to meriting long life. He never rejoiced in someone else's misfortune. He never rejoiced in somebody else's misfortune. We do that. If you're on social media, people do that. Not all your friends on social media are your friends. And if you ever share something, maybe something that hasn't gone well in your life, you're one of these people that like to, tell the whole world what it is you're going through, good or bad, and it might be something that's bad. Not everybody that sees that post is going to have the attitude that you think they're going to have. This is an important subject. When somebody else sees misfortune and is happy, that it didn't happen to him, that's one thing, but in a very many cases, his happiness is augmented by the fact that it did happen to somebody else. And this flies in the face of loving your neighbor as yourself. The whole concept of loving your neighbor as yourself is that your children, your neighbor's children, their welfare is to be considered as equal to the welfare that you feel for your own children. And so a neighbor's child being injured in some way, hash v'shalom, this is something that would should rattle you like it rattles their very own father. This is the true essence of having a love for your neighbor as yourself. And it's hard. It's not easy to develop that type of level of awareness and be so attuned to your brother or your neighbor. Not to rejoice at anybody else's misfortune is not so easy, but Rabbi Zera always made it a principle to strive to be very sorry when something happened to somebody else to such an extent that he couldn't feel any kind of satisfaction. I'll read that again. Not to rejoice at somebody else's misfortune is not so easy, but Rabbi Zera always made it a principle to strive to be sorry when something happened to somebody else to such an extent that he couldn't feel any kind of satisfaction. The Mesillat Yesharim says, and I never called my fellow man by nickname. Again, we've got this nickname again. Even though everyone else called him by that name, it wasn't an insulting name. Nevertheless, he always honored him by calling him his full name, his full correct name. So, if you shorten somebody's name or give it a sort of a variation, this can be, in a sense, disrespecting that person's parents who, sat up all night trying to think of that name for that child. He's reached adulthood and you are going, no, I'm going to call him a different name and just completely disregard the name his parents gave him. So it's an act of respect by calling somebody about their name, which is almost impossible in Australia in the workplace. If you have a job and live in Australia, it's very difficult for you to find anybody that would not embellish the name in some way. And sometimes people from foreign countries will try and simplify their name. We have a guy at work, Dipender. He's an Indian fellow, and many of us call him the Deep. But that's something that's not the name that his parents gave him. And so, it's an interesting subject. So if somebody respects somebody else by calling them their name, and also too, this is a little bit off topic, but if you're going to call someone, maybe you're going to call another family member in the home over to you, it's a very good practice to, rather than call out in one part of the house to the other, you actually get up from where you are and you walk over to the person and say, could you come and help me with something for a second? Or if you could ask them the question, you get up and you move your body from one room to the next to get to the other person, rather than call out. It's a sign of disrespect to some degree. Unless you're, sort of pinned under a couch or something's fallen on you, or a cabinet's fallen on you, you should always try and refrain from calling out to people. Some jobs you have to call out, but it's just an interesting side note. The Mesillat Yesharim says, here you have deeds of hasadut in all the ways that were explained above, hasadut toward Hashem and hasadut toward fellow man. And I think we'll leave it there. That takes us to part 11 of chapter 19. Thank you so much for joining me. If there's anything more that you want to add to some of the stuff that we looked at in terms of what else brings long life, feel free to put something down in the comments. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a great week. Bye for now.